Alright, fuck it. Let's get live. No, it's late at night. I've been working. Here's something I've been wanting to talk about. I didn't make one of my cards about it, but I've been thinking about it a little bit. And like most of my ideas, especially in the raw mode. Oh, so it looks like it's coming. Let's just make sure there's audio, shall we? And like most of my alright, sounds like ideas, especially in the raw mode. So, looks like it's coming. Let's just make sure it's got a couple things, and like most of my alright, sounds like ideas, especially in the raw mode. So, there we go. So it has a couple things together. Now, the main topic is non-monetization of the discourse. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with monetized media streams, be it television, YouTube, or anything else. People want to go pro, that's fine. And there's things you can add. I watched the Majority Report. I'm a member. It's something I help them monetize. I watch tons of other things, David Pakman and TYT, that I'm not going to monetize, but I give them my support and my time. But I watch a lot of things that I definitely don't want to support, but I want to keep track of as well, that try to monetize. Like V. I watch V, this channel, V, this Romanian guy. I unsubscribed to Sticks and Hammer, but I watched him for years. Just had enough of him. I don't really mind that people want to monetize, but it puts them in a different category. And there's a trust factor. It's not that I don't trust them so much as, I have to trust them in a different way. And also, I add an expectation to what I expect from them, like the Majority Report, where they take that time, that daily time, to do research, and more than just daily, but over time, do research, form positions, take risks and make predictions, and let us all see how that turns out. And if you monetize, you owe something to your audience a little bit to earn the respect. If you don't monetize, then you don't. You don't have to do that to earn respect. You don't have to do anything to earn respect. You can maybe lose respect. But even that's hard. If you're not e-begging, or at least, or some kind of monetizing, losing respect, other people might lose respect because they have all these kind of judgmental attitudes. But me, I'm not gonna. If you are totally non-monetized and you're just putting your message out there to share your message and take part in public discourse, then it's really hard for you to lose credibility. You can ruin a particular relationship, there was one of these guys that had a scientific theory, and I critiqued it. He didn't like it. I'm of the utmost sympathy that, he had sort of paranoid personality tendencies and had thought I was part of NASA or something that was, I was spying on him, and, I had this paranoid thing about me that made this toxic relationship. And so on a one-to-one basis, it ruined our relationship. But it didn't discredit his whole position. In other words, his position was honest. It's funny because if you think about it analytically, not monetizing your video does not monetizing your content one way or another, it doesn't really ensure that you're more trustworthy. In the war of propaganda, there's a lot of non-monetized efforts. But I feel like it goes a long way. If you're just a regular person, speaking to a camera, for that matter, typing in comments or whatever, if you're not monetized, and it might take some tracing to see if a comment might come from a monetized source, but if you know that something isn't monetized, then there's a certain amount of, you can just take it at face value. Not that people don't lie or people don't front or no, a million things. Of course, the communication is just as complicated as can be. But to me, it's in, well, I was going to say a better category, but it's not so much that the category is better. It's what I prefer. It's what I like out of YouTube, right? Because we were here for, I don't know, it seems like several years, however long it was, where you couldn't monetize. To monetize, you had to get really creative, sell the ads yourself, put them in your video, right? So nobody was monetized, and it was all for shits and giggles, as they say. And in the case of discussing serious topics, even if you didn't, do it seriously, maybe you made a big joke out of it, but still the topic's serious, then, there was something genuine. People could put in a lot of production value or do animation. Somebody brought up Azranak lately. I guess I was watching a Dick Coughlin stream. And that must have been around the time that we did start monetizing. But some people did, animation and stuff, obviously out of their creative essence. There was no chance of it being directly monetizable. Now, if you made a demo reel of your comedy or your skit making ability or something and put it on YouTube, there was enough of the 10-minute of internet fame kind of viral thing that people obviously could hope to get noticed. But even then, it was indirect monetization. So even though some people's dreams might have, been that way, it was secondary. It was secondary. And I like that. That's what I prefer. I would like to have a discussion, a medium, a site that had that, like there was no direct monetization. You can write a book. If you do a bunch of great arguments and stuff, you can monetize it by writing a book. But to have a format, while possibly useful to self-promote, was not a direct monetization vehicle. To me, that's a big benefit. Now, at the same time, I want to make this discussion more complex through the fact that I have these feelings now about this group. I feel like I am a part of a group. The changing features of YouTube have made it hard for this group to it doesn't grow the way it used to grow. It's not built the way it used to be built, but and it might be separated from similar types of groups that are forming anew or whatever, or perhaps elsewhere on the internet. But I am in this group of mostly non-monetized, in the sense that some of us that monetize by, let's say, have like Dick Coughlin, he's on the threshold of monetized through Patreon and some monetization support, but keeping a pretty raw part of the public dialogue. like his content isn't designed for monetization, but he accepts patrons of the arts kind of thing. So that's at a transition. Whereas the whole group, if you think of it that way, I don't know, it might include some of these other monetized people I don't really watch anymore. Maybe I'm just giving Dick a free pass because he's genuine. His opinion is genuine. Sort of the exception that proves the rule. To monetize doesn't require compromising anything. Some people are unable to compromise, but it also makes it difficult to monetize. So it's very similar to the non-monetized people. You have someone like in Mendham who is pretty much non-monetized, but he does get donations and what do you call good hearts that help out or donate or just gift. But again, I would consider Gary in the as part of more of the non-monetized group, and actually also, and thinking about Heidelberg, I wonder, to me, I felt like the people that were non-monetized are sort of self-selecting to be in this kind of a discussion society, which, since people get all hot and bothered, is a little bit like a fight club. And I would rather, we really like each other, but it's just words, virtual fighting. Nobody really gets their bones broken or anything. So if that's the way it is, we could go for it. And we don't really have to show mercy for each other because, we're all tough. We must be tough or we wouldn't stick around for this kind of thing. But then, now I've realized that that's not necessarily true. We're all going through an emotional drivers of why we do this as a hobby or an interest, whatever the reason is. And I look at myself and see, well, what are those drivers? Why do I want to keep having this public dialogue open to people that I haven't met that can come and then disagree with me, or, all the different modes of kind of feedback. People people that are just names and comments for years and years that you kind of know, and then drive-bys, but then drive-bys of new names that are actually old people, you don't know it, or you can even figure it out, and people take a new persona, and all this weird, surreal interaction that you have. But anyway, what kind of an assumption can you make about how robust someone is and what their emotional reasons are? I do think Gary has an emotional thick skin and strength, so I feel like I'm allowed to say my piece and I'm not going to affect him. But the scientific stuff, for example, makes me wonder. It's like, how much of this is just because, okay, Gary, he says he has an anxiety kind of an issue, and with people, how much of this interaction, this non-monetized part of the interaction, is to get hopefully a positive feedback or a validation. Maybe to cope with the complexities of life, Gary needs to think that, his scientific proposals are 100% reliable. It's unlikely that I would convince him through my critique that it's not so awesome, but it's possible. And would I want that? No, I wouldn't. I want to interact with people to find out, to probe more of their ideas. But it's like the Heisenberg Principle, where if I go shooting laser beams into your soul and shining light on things that have hitherto been in the dark, maybe I'm going to blind some of the deep sea fish, or I don't know. People give me this feedback that arguing with me is somehow, harsh. And I I personally have no like feelings of maybe I'm unlikable. You know, like people say, oh, because you lie, and you. To me, this all sounds like convicting Socrates for corrupting the youth, or they used to say philosophers would convince people of things they didn't really believe, like, you know, some kind of a mental magic spell. I don't want to hurt other people in the not-for-profit public discourse hobby business. I don't think that's what I do. But I do now see that in this, you know, in this kind of category of discussion, you can't, you know, if people are just self-selected, I've been respecting people that like show up and keep arguing. But if they're just obsessively, compulsively mandated to do that, again, I could go, well, me too, so am I. But if it's hard for them, or, you know, or you have an influence and convince somebody, let's say you undermine somebody's false belief in their ideas such that they find it difficult to cope emotionally with the complexities of life as they know it, then that's not been a good influence on another person. So how much do you have to care? With Kazumi too, you know, I saw a title of a video of his about getting red pilled or whatever, and I thought, oh, this will be interesting. And I thought, you know, overly familiar, like, oh, I can just watch this and live react. And then that, I wouldn't say hurt his feelings, but, you know, irked him or whatever, came across the wrong way. And then it's like that. I didn't mean any of that, to have that kind of, I mean, I did kind of goof around and da-da-da-da, but I thought overly familiar, it'll be fine. And it wasn't, and had an impact when I wasn't planning to have an impact, and yet it was my honest feeling, so I can't say, hey, I didn't mean, you know, those jokes that I made, or those voices that I made, or whatever. And and then we get into this whole thing, if I'm trying to pwn him or not, and it's like, well, I don't feel bad about any of that. It's all fair and good, right? And yet I also don't feel like good about it, in that that's not what I was going for. Maybe I should think about these matchups more. And then my ego would get in the way, and it's like, well, I don't look out there and see anybody that deserves, or, you know, in the set, I don't see like, hey, me and Snake Plisskenist are evenly matched. It's okay if I go after him. I mean, when I was criticizing Snake Plisskenist or whatever, you know, making a satirical song, I didn't feel like I had to hold any punches, and I also didn't feel like I was throwing really super hard. I wasn't trying to be destructive. I was just like, hey, here's what's natural. But I don't know, in that case, I don't think he gave a damn, and I called it right. And I think 100 times out of 101 times, I am calling it right. Someone like Gary has plenty tough skin and whatnot. But then there's the other times where, you know, the astrometry guy couldn't take it, or he's going through something, or I emotionally, trigger, and I mean that in the most sympathetic way. Somebody, I push somebody's buttons. Maybe even as a human, I'm subconsciously, I could see the buttons, and I don't think of them as buttons. I think of them as, hey, I'm tickling you. Let's have a little joke back and forth. In reality, I'm zeroing in on something that hurts someone or whatnot. So how can I argue science with Gary when he gets so upset about my opinions that I have? I mean, on the one hand, it's like, hey, you have no right to get so upset about the opinions that I have. On the other hand, it might be that my opinions are so overwhelming or something that, it causes him to, have a freak out. I choose a picture. Here, look at this picture of water diffraction. And he has a freak out like I'm gang stalking him with fake photos and fake news. And it's like, you can think that's not a valid picture, but I think it is a valid picture, and not picking it as some sort of a way to get into your head and push your buttons. But now I'm realizing, well, if it does push the person's buttons, and once you notice that their buttons got pushed by it, then what? Am I supposed to back off? This is the public dialogue, right? This is the non-monetized public dialogue. Nobody has to back off. But do I have to want to back off if it's like... If it's impossible to lead somebody to the truth, that's not a problem. But what if leading them to the truth brings them through a difficult emotional time, right? So it's like rescuing somebody and you go in there and you take them up in one of the baskets and they're going to fall out of the basket. Or, what I mean? Somebody's going to die while you're rescuing them. So, yeah, I'm taking you to the truth. I have total faith that the truth is a good thing to know. But on the way from your delusion to the truth, you're going to panic and jump out of the rescue basket. You're going to have a seizure because you can't survive the ambulance ride. You should be left where you are. You're going to survive longer there than on the ambulance ride. Then it's not responsible to take part in the open dialogue, because you might, somebody might be relying on their potential to win the next Nobel Prize, and if you show that their theory is invalid, then there's a personal crisis. I mean, even saying that much is so referential to Gary. It's relying on Gary, being strong enough to not give a damn about that. And I didn't even mean Gary. I mean any of these people with their physical theories. And I mean any of these people with the non-physical theories. Any of the people out there, if you contradict them, you could drag them through an emotional situation that they can't handle. What is the threshold of that being okay to try out? If you talk to somebody for 5 years and you start to realize that, it can't be good for them emotionally, how much of a responsibility do I have for that? I mean, I'm here to discuss things on my terms as well. But if people are going to have these, everybody's too afraid to debate me. I could go around and get people to interview one at a time probably. And I consider that because I like the conversational thing, and I think that usually goes pretty good. And we had the hangouts, and I talked with people of all, conservatives and everything. I think that can go well, but in terms of just having a YouTube channel and other people interacting, I've had a lot of freakouts. One thing I like about Gary is he never was too afraid to discuss things. He does freak out, but he'll still keep doing it. But maybe that's just an obsessive compulsive need to interact with people willing to interact with you or whatever. But I mean, there's an awful lot of people where there's a huge fear factor. And, I know it's not just because they think, well, because I'm stupid, because they love to debate with people that are ridiculous and stupid. It's because they don't want to have to formulate a word chain to match my word chain. But I don't like that. I want to have the conversation. And I feel like I'm just too probing. when I'm not trying to defeat someone's argument and I'm just trying to find out, well, what is it really? And I'm asking the questions that rattle out all the little details, people seem to have this kind of a choke scare kind of reaction to it. And, on the one hand, I still feel the same I've always felt, which is, well, that's on them. Why is that? You've voluntarily entered into this non-monetized discussion domain of your own free will. So, you should be able to handle the interactions, whatever they are. I do. People complain about my ideas, and I'm just like, okay, let's engage. But on the other hand, of course, I understand why people don't actually follow through with that as their reaction, because people are actually here for all different kinds of reasons. And as Heisenberg said, mostly it's, the idea of they have the right idea, and they're such nice people, they're going to help other people out by making sure everybody else knows the right idea, by arguing and being super convincing. And me, it's just like, I don't think you have any hope of convincing me of things directly, because I just want information. I get raw information from you guys and the world and everything that I can notice and pay attention to. And then I build ideas for myself out of that raw information. Now, when you give me a big, complete, complicated idea, I want to know where it comes from, and I will break it and cut it down and slice it down into these little bits. I'll take your Lego castle and I will break it down into all the parts of the Lego castle, all the Legos and the turrets and the various things, the parts of the whole that you built out of multiple Legos, and whatever I can notice in terms of the parts at various scales, and I'll break those down into more or less a kind of raw data, and then I'll use the pieces I want and build something else up. And that's what I expect you guys to be doing too, and that's again where I'm making a positive assumption, granting to other people this building ideas from raw data presumption, which is a positive granting of creative agency to you guys, which I think is a good benefit of the doubt that I grant you, and that I'm also realizing, though, yeah, that's also where you go, and that's why they're in the heavyweight class, and you can go ahead and fight them like they were heavyweights, ignoring the fact that some of you aren't heavyweights. So I don't really know where my obligation is in terms of that. And until I figure that out, I don't really know how to go pursue these conversations. I know how to get them, including I don't need to use YouTube. There's a million ways, in the real world. I have these kind of conversations, friends, new acquaintances, people. It's a matter of morally zeroing in on the ethical way to pursue these conversations. Especially in the domain where it's open, where you're just pursuing it in an open way, and other people have a channel like Kazumi or whatever. And I'm sorry, Kazum. I like Kazumi. It's hard to remember. And how hard or what tone of voice am I supposed to use if I want to have a discussion with Kazum? And if I try it again at some point, I realize, yeah, it's probably a more gentle tone, less goofing. I blew that with Barklord too. He's forgiven me. I think he understands me too, but this was years and years ago. Did the same kind of thing, more goofing around. And that's, my kind of goofing around and treating people like they're thick skin. You know, my grandma, who was a sweet making cookies for everybody grandma, she was the kind of person, it's like, you ask her, what time is it? And she says, it's time for all fools to die. Do you feel sick? So to me, that's grandma humor, right? So then I do that when I'm too familiar with people, and okay, I could probably change that. But believe me, Kazuma is not the problem that I have in terms of discussing. I'm thinking more people that I disagree with. He's a little bit of an example because sometimes I'm critical of some of his escapades or adventures, being tolerant or having more of sympathy for the anti-SJW or whatever you want to put it, the red-pilled kind of aspect that he slightly has, which I totally respect. I don't think there's any. I mean, I dig it, but I can goof on it or criticize it in a way that I could do that more. So he's a little bit of an example of that. But really, what I'm talking about is someone like Gary, who his physical ideas are just like, I'd love to talk to him. I mean, I respect people's right to have their street philosophy, their natural philosophy be scientific ideas. But I don't want to have to hold my hands behind my back, or I just want to be able to come full strength with what I think. And he's thick-skinned enough and he's caustic enough that he sort of, it's like, why do you don't have to pull your punches or whatever with him, and yet of course you do, because what's the point? I mean, I'm scared if I was, I mean, I know Gary's too stubborn to ever get convinced of, the problems, like the fundamental problems in his physical system. But just hypothetically, if I'm talking to him and making those arguments, what if he listened to reason and his faith in his physical system was undermined? Well, that doesn't make the world any better, because it's not like his physical system's in danger of misleading people, really, in physics. So it's just like a million other ideas of like, well, might as well give it some thought or whatever. It's like whatever. And if he's emotionally getting some buoyancy in his life from it, then it's a net positive in the world, right? It's not really harming anybody, and he's getting some flotation from it. Then if I even discuss it with them, there's a danger of me puncturing his flotation unit. So you see how it makes the whole non-monetized public discourse arena a super complicated thing if you don't want to emotionally destroy people. I mean, I want to have debates with Gutika about politics, but I guess maybe I can't, because somehow the way I argue makes people just triggered, and I'm an SJW. I don't want to trigger people and make them actually like have that kind of a feeling. I want people to discuss things with me and go, that's a good point. I don't believe that. I'm sure there's something. Hey, I thought of why you're wrong, Piero. Oh, good point. Let me think about that. That's what I want. I don't want it to be like, you destroyed society. You called me, I'm a sucker. And yet I don't mind when we get all, like aggravated, like, yo, but what are you saying that for? I don't mind that. I think that energy is fine. I just don't want people to have those shuddering moments of where you feel so attacked that then you get this paranoid idea that this other person who's non-monetizedly arguing with you like has some super weird motivation other than I like talking about ideas, and I think ideas can butt horns. Nobody has to die. You might get a few little bruises, maybe a couple scars, but bucked horns, nobody died. And right now, I don't really get where the where the line is, where the healthy, happy line is. And for years up till recently, though I've struggled the last few years, maybe 5, I had a really romantic idea about the public dialogue, and I still have that intellectually, but I've lost the thread. I don't have the emotional confidence that just taking part in the public dialogue will slowly but surely lead to the public good. And it's almost like partly what's happened is the internet has decayed, and we need a refreshing of the internet, to get the effect, the positive effect of the public dialogue going again. Not that it started with the internet, because it's letters to the editor, it's even, the parties people they get together and people communicate their political and other little emotions that or whatever's going on in their life, little or big. So yeah, I'm at a inflection or growth point trying to figure this out. And I don't think probably I'm the only one, really. Seems like society's been affected by this kind of thing now. So, cheers.